Hello and welcome. I'm outside today between the showers to be at one with nature. The Buddha said we can study nature. It is the Dharma. All that is to be known of impermanence, suffering, and not self is there and evident all around us. And this is so true. Even in cities where you have plants or trees or little park areas, or even a small window box, or nothing at all, just concrete. It's all subject to impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and being out of our control. Even this concrete wall here, which is relatively new, I think they put this around my little veranda here, is already breaking up. This is to be expected. Although we try to avoid expectations, at least if we can see impermanence of that nature, then when it happens, we're not disappointed. Yesterday, or in the last questions and answers talk, there was one question on the 5 things for frequent recollection. This is more directed at monks and their asubha practice, which I mentioned: hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth and skin. And one of the questions was with regards to why are eyes not included, which is a question I too have had myself in my mind for many years, and asked and not received a satisfactory answer. But whilst on Pindapata this morning, walking, I remembered what I said in the previous talk with regards to this, that hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth and skin are all in fact aspects of our body, in fact the seen aspects of our body, the only seen aspects of our body by others and ourselves, that are in fact already dead, finished with. Our skin on the surface is just dead cells, as is our hair, teeth, head, nails, teeth, nails, fingernails. This is the differential between eyes, I think. This is why they're not included in that those 5 things for recollection, because the actual eyeball, actually the questioner did say eyeball as opposed to eyes, but is even on its surface covered with living cells. From my own experience of some eye troubles with abrasion of the cornea, I know that the cornea is a very sensitive and delicate part of our body that when damaged causes you considerable pain, and also you can't see. So that is very much alive. So this is perhaps one way we can consider why those, although very visible and something that draws our attention, are not included in those 5. I thought I'd just cover that as it came to me, just on Pindapata, walking in the pouring rain this morning. This is why I'm taking advantage of some sun now. And 7 kilometers, for some reason that came up. So the first comment, this is one I skipped yesterday, or in the last questions and answers talk, because I had to look it up. And what I had to look up was, do you interpret the Atanatya Sutta literally or metaphorically? The Atanatya Sutta, which is what I had to quickly look up to remind myself, just in the chanting book was sufficient, is one of the protective chants, paritas. I actually think it's perhaps one that was added later. That's why I had to look it up. I rarely, if ever, chant it. I'd never chanted on my own. And in answer to your question, do I interpret it literally or metaphorically? Very much metaphorically. I don't discount all it says. What it is, it's an attempt to evoke protection from all of the different realms of beings, gods and devas and then Nagas and monsters, all sorts of mythical Buddhist mythology. And I don't really go in much for that myself, and tend to just chant the reflections on the practice and the qualities of the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, and some of the suttas that are appropriate to our practice. Also the blessings chants, which incorporate our shared mutual best wishes for each other and for all beings, I think are very wholesome in their nature and good for our practice. The other suttas are useful in reminding us. In Thailand they like to chant the recollection of the 32 parts of the body, and lay people also do this each and every day, as well as some asubha practices in the chanting, reflecting on the qualities of our food, of our clothing, on our shelter and medicines, but also reflecting on the fact that we can do with the most simplest of all of those 4 requisites, even as lay people. And that's what brings me on really to the next few questions. So I'll need to just plan this, because I've highlighted 3 questions. The reason I say that brings me on to the next few questions is because this is people with the question in mind as to whether to stay in ordinary lay life, practicing, but they have a wish, a desire to ordain, become monks, or maybe nuns. Help, I want to become a monk because I see that wise men like you are receiving ultimate contentment as monks, but at the same time I just want to live as a lay person, start a family and enjoy happiness with my family, playing with my children, success in business as an entrepreneur, sipping wine with the lads in a fancy restaurant, and it goes on. I'm in my 20s and I'm worried if I start a family I might get into entanglements if I want to become a monk in the future. It's best for me to answer now. What do I do, monk? I need your guidance. Tell me what to do. Okay, only you can decide what to do. I can't tell you what to do. As someone who's replied to you has said, that they're pretty sure that monks cannot persuade people. We certainly wouldn't even want to persuade anybody to ordain. The Buddha set out a very clear and definite and straightforward answer to this. You can be part of the fourfold assembly, which is monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen, bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, upasakas, upasakas. With a very defining difference, that the lay people have 5 precepts to adhere to, whereas monastics or people living in monasteries have very many more, 227 in the case of a bhikkhu. And this is important to understand because we need both. The monastics rely on the support of lay people, whom, in order to support them, need to be providing only and firstly for their own families and themselves, then their families and anyone dependent on them, and then with whatever's little left, maybe donate to the monasteries in order to feed the monks, provide them with clothing, shelter and medicine of the most simple nature. So it doesn't require much. But without that support, there would be no Sangha, because the relationship between the Sangha and lay people is such that in order for the Sangha to survive, lay people are required. And then in order for Buddhism, the religion, the sasana, to survive, the Sangha is required. To live as the Buddha taught, with that more disciplined form of practice, in a closed environment, a celibate life, adhering to many rules, but they're not so much rules as supportive guidelines towards keeping the main moral precepts. Only individuals can decide which side of the fence to jump onto. It's often tried, and I've tried myself, to be on the fence between lay life and monastic life. But what will happen even if you succeed, as I kind of succeeded, I was able to live alone for 3 years in my van on very little food, eating once a day, on 8 precepts. Practice, the opportunity to practice was very good. I only had to work 2 days a week, job that required no thinking, a very basic job on minimum wage, just to earn sufficient money to support myself, because I was a lay person. I had to support myself. I couldn't rely on others. But it took up very little time, but it was enough to sustain a good, comfortable living in my little van, alone on a beach in southern England for 3 years. But my practice developed very well during that time. It was in a way ideal, because it was the best of both worlds, lay life and monastic life. However, because of the independence that I had and the ability to be able to meditate a lot, as my practice developed, my inclination was towards, actually away from lay life and more towards ordination, in order to fully immerse myself in the practice without any concerns whatsoever. So with no work, no van to have to look after, tax, MOT, put fuel in or whatever, even though I never travelled anywhere in it. It had to be running for legal reasons. So I was still had a foot in samsara, but very much a foot in the world of the Sangha. And spent more of my time visiting monasteries as time went on, and the inclination just grew. And this is what happens naturally through the practice. So anyone with any doubts, I should always suggest you carry on doing what you're doing, you carry on practicing, as the Buddha has made it very clear that we can just as easily attain to enlightenment, to become free from suffering in this lifetime, as lay people, as we can as monastics. It's just that the monastic and Sangha environment is more supportive to practice only, and then obviously to that end, that goal, that attainment. However, there is a long period of training in living in monasteries and acclimatizing yourself, maybe either to monastic life or even to different cultures, depending on where that monastery is, if you're having to travel outside of your country. So what you've highlighted there is the decision we have to make. And this is the whole point. You make a decision to renounce all of that idea of family life, playing with your children, going to your bars with your friends and sipping wine and watching musical shows. All of this is something you renounce because you've seen the benefit of not doing that. You've seen the contentment that can be derived from meditation, away from all of that external, sensual stimuli. And the other comment, being someone from a country where there is no Buddhism, they want to earn sufficient money to be able to, they say, come to Sri Lanka, ordain as a monk, and but in order to do so, they need to raise enough money in the meantime. So, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, you say Sri Lanka, so you obviously have your own reasons for that, but you need to shop around. It doesn't necessarily mean just because I'm here. I didn't ordain here. I ordained in India, in fact. Or I might have ordained in Thailand. This was the original plan. But I'm very glad that I ordained where I did, for many reasons, which I won't go into now. But it was just the most clear-cut, clean, uninfluenced by external culture form of Theravada Buddhism I could find, and very adherent to the Vinaya Pitaka, the code of practice for monks and nuns, and very much based on the suttas, but also with a very deep understanding and level, if you wanted it, and access to the more intellectual side of the Abhidharma. So it encompassed all parts of the Tipitaka, the Pali Canon, whereas often you'll find in certain countries they'll go more towards either Vinaya, the rules and things like that, or more towards the suttas, or more towards the Abhidharma. Now, I did say this once and got into trouble because the man took it quite literally, but it is considered that here, Sri Lanka is very much Sutta Pitaka land, Thailand is Vinaya Pitaka land, and Burma, or Myanmar, is Abhidharma Pitaka land. But I'm never going to say that again in public, I thought, because this man got very upset when I said that, because he was from Sri Lanka and he thought that I was suggesting that they knew nothing about the other two, which wasn't really the point. It was just generally speaking. So I was fortunate, as you might find also in the Western countries, America, Europe, England, with Theravada monasteries that are not in Buddhist countries, that they have a more balanced view, a more holistic view of the practice and the teachings of the Buddha. I'm starting to get bitten now, the mosquitoes and things are coming out. But what your question is about your way of earning money. You want to earn a lot of money through YouTube. Actually, it really doesn't matter how you earn your money, as long as it's within the Noble Eightfold Path of right to livelihood. As long as your method of gaining an income is causing no harm to any living beings, then it's good. You don't need a considerable amount of money. I didn't have very much money. I had enough money to live and had saved just enough money for flight tickets and some provision for if you need to be in an emergency, return to your own country. And if you have any unforeseen expenses or visa complications. And I had to have a little bit more in place and saved up behind me, because at the time when I was travelling and ordaining, it was also the COVID time. But with things a little more fluid and easy these days, you don't need a great deal, just enough for your flights there, and just in case, flights back, and also just in case some accommodation should it not work out in the monastery you choose firstly, whilst you look around for another one, because there's nothing to stop you doing that. So really the line of work and whether YouTube's a good thing or not, I mean, I'm not going to, I'm sure there's easier ways to earn money than but if you're very, as you say, know all about YouTube, then if that's the way you can earn money, then it doesn't matter, as long as it's wholesome and not causing any harm. Now there was one other question, if I know how to find it, with regards to, this is actually someone who is trying to adhere to the 8 precepts in lay life. So the Buddha recommended actually that lay people just have the 5 precepts, and then on the Uposatha days or just adhere to the 8 precepts. This way you can integrate naturally into lay life, which is going to be indulging in entertainment, will eat in the afternoon, and will carry on what is normal functions of life. The additional precepts after the first 5 are not really moral precepts. In fact, even some consider the 5th, because alcohol is commonly drunk in many countries and not considered immoral, not to be one of the precepts, but it definitely is, because it comes under the 5 precepts, because what you're doing is you're destroying mindfulness, and the whole practice is about mindfulness, and this can lead to the breaking of the other 1, 2, 3, 4 precepts: killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, or lying, if you were to take intoxicants. So this is why it's very important. So on top of that though, and eating in the afternoon, entertainment, beautification, sleeping in a high and luxurious bed, really they're to enable you to practice more thoroughly, diligently, have more time also to practice. And this can be reserved for Uposatha days or just simply when you visit the monastery. If you want to try and incorporate it into life fully, as I did, then you will find that although you're saying you want to keep 8 precepts, but then you can't mix with your friends who enjoy going out and listening to music and all of the normal things, well, you can explain to them you're keeping, as someone, very nice answer, someone's already replied to it, suggests, you could just explain to them that you're keeping 8 precepts and maybe just join them for some activities that don't involve drinking or listening to music and going out and things like that, and therefore be able to keep your 8 precepts along with them. However, that's going to be very difficult to do. It doesn't work. People are not going to necessarily understand, and they might just consider you as trying to preach to them, convert them, and this is not what we do. It's much better that you stick to certain days of the week, and it's not going to do too much harm, with the exception of the 5th precept, which one must always keep. But if you go out with people and they're listening to music, there will come a time again, though, where you're sitting on the fence. You will have to decide. But once you decide and you take 8 precepts and you decide that and you're able to keep them of your own volition and carry on in lay life, it will push you in the direction of going to live in a monastery, ordaining at some point in the future. It's inevitable. They weren't designed for lay people other than for additional practice on Uposatha days, or once a week, or on special days, special occasions, whenever you choose. It is up to you. So those 3 questions are really lay life or monastic life, ordination or not. Really, you have to decide. It's how your practice is going will determine it for you. But there's nothing wrong with continuing with your practice in lay life. If you're keeping the 5 precepts and you're practicing meditation, you will develop the wisdom and clear understanding, and you are practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. So it is good enough. And if you want more, the options are there for you, but it is your decision. This is a short question, but why do you create a Buddhist and worship him? So I don't, and I don't understand the question. I don't pray to anything, create anything, or worship anything. I don't believe in anything. I understand the characteristics of existence, anicca, dukkha, anatta. Everything's impermanent, unsatisfactory, and out of my control, and don't try to change that. This is creation, creating something. I certainly don't create a Buddha. There is if you're referring to the chanting videos or where there's a Buddha Rupa, a statue on my wall, we call it Buddha Rupa, and I bow to it. This is representation only of our teacher, and by bowing you are using your body to express your gratitude to the teacher, not directly, because he has long since died, no longer in samsara, in any realm that we can understand. Parinibbana, has attained to nibbana finally, will never return to any of the realms that we know or understand or have experienced. So, in that sense, we are just reminding ourselves of the importance of that result, having attained to parinibbana, as being the goal we are trying to attain to. And that is what we're bowing to. So that is perhaps what you mean by worship, and what you mean by creating a Buddha. Basically, you've got someone to stick it on the wall and I bow to it, because this is what we do when we come in and out of our place of practice, or our kuti where we live, where there is a Buddha Rupa, and it reminds us. And some people will do full bodily prostrations. Some will just bow like this, to extremes, or somewhere in between. But we do this to remind ourselves only. And a good way of always reminding ourselves is to bring our attention into the body. So doing an actual, a mindful bodily movement is a very good way of reinforcing an idea. We bow 3 times because it reminds us of the Buddha, our teacher, the Dharma, and I'm saying in my head, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, those 3. Or there's another cat, this other cat, which never comes to see me. This cat that comes to see me a lot is there. Sorry, they're not. You can't see them, so I should stop talking about things you can't see. Okay, this is the next question. Is there room for alchemy and dualism in Buddhism? Well, these words are English words, and one can look them up in the dictionary, but you can find all sorts of explanations and usages of them in common language, in different cultures and within different religions and philosophies. then it gets complicated. But if we take these words literally, as I tend to do, alchemy just means to me chemistry. It comes from making gold, really, originally, but alchemy means chemistry, and that has no real place in Buddhist practice or in Buddhism or anything to do with Buddhism. So no, I wouldn't suggest there's room for that. As far as dualism is concerned, then I would say that Buddhism is both dualistic and non-dualistic in a way. It gets a little bit of a complicated and deep and meaningful conversation, that one. But literally speaking, it is dualistic, because I am not this body or this thinking mind, but that which knows this body and this thinking mind. And by that, immediately, you're identifying two, as in dual, dualistic, dualism. Non-dualistic implies that we are all one, as I began the talk with, I am one at one with nature. I don't mean that literally. I'm not any part of this concrete or that tree. However, I am of the same elements. I'm made of solidity, we call earth, liquidity, we call water, wind, air, gaseous nature, gases we call wind, earth, water, wind, and fire, the temperature that sort of is maintained by inanimate objects in any state or form. We usually refer to as the fourth element of fire. But in Buddhism, we have the fifth element of space, not as in space in terms of empty holes in your body, like your tummy or your lungs, which are filled with air, so they're not exactly space, but empty space. The space that is within atoms, for instance, dividing protons and neutrons. There's some kind of space there. Or in outer space, this emptiness, that space. And we also have mind, or citta, or consciousness, but not consciousness as in vijnana, in the five khandhas, but that we were just speaking of, knowing. So in that sense, I am made of the same thing, and when I die, physical body dies, thinking brain stops, I'll just become, as they say in the funeral services in the Christian faiths, and probably some others, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I'll just become dust and swept up on this floor, eventually, if I was just left dead sitting here. But usually we get rid of our bodies, we bury them, we burn them, but they just go back into nature. Then you're at one, or what was representative of the physical form that you see and we perceive of others as of ourselves, is at one with nature. But that which knows that is not. The tree, I don't think, is a sentient being, and maybe does not have this awareness that it is a tree. Maybe it does. We can't ask it, so there's no point questioning it, discussing it, taking it any further. We'll never get the answer to that. Does a blade of grass feel pain? We assume not, but we don't know. We cannot know. If we deliberate, we ponder over the unquestionable, the unanswerable questions, we can just waste time. That's not to say that some things have to be thought about and have been thought about in the past to develop the understanding that we have of them now. But certain things will never be determined, and have not yet been determined, and probably won't be determined within our lifetimes. So we should concentrate within this lifetime on what we can know, and that is that there is suffering, a cause of suffering, an end of suffering, and the path, the way to end that suffering is the path leading to the end of suffering, the Noble Eightfold Path. And that is our practice, which doesn't include long studies into things that we won't get the answer from, but to really understand what is the truth and is evident all around us. So Can you explain the difference between your meditation technique and Mahasi Sayadaw way? Okay, it's not my meditation technique. I use as meditation as taught by the Buddha. Anapanasati is what I talk about. It isn't necessarily my exact technique these days. You, with this, are watching the breath as an experience. Now, some interpret that as they find a location at the tip of the nose to feel the breath coming in and going out as a point of focus, to become one-pointed and focused on the breath. I tend not to do that myself. My practice is, as it says in the Anapanasati Sutta, to observe the whole body of the breath, so the whole lump of air coming in and the whole lump of air going out. That's what I interpret as the body of the breath. But not at one particular point, but in the same sense, I don't follow it through the body. It only goes in and out in a short pipe into your lungs and out again. And you can be aware of this in its entirety, that you are breathing in long, breathing out long, breathing in short, breathing out short, deep, shallow, warm, cool, hot, cold. You know, these aspects of breathing you can know without identifying a particular point. This is my practice of Anapanasati. The Mahasi Sayadaw method, that taught by Yuttadhammo Bhikkhu, and if you want to really understand that, watch Yuttadhammo Bhikkhu, his channel, because he teaches this very thoroughly and has booklets on the subject, is you observe the rising and the falling of the abdomen only. Now that's the very surface of the practice, and the difference, that's the difference there. However, then it goes into a much deeper level of understanding, whereas my non-understanding of the Mahasi Sayadaw practice, because I haven't practiced it, I might have tried just watching, observing the rising of the abdomen, the falling of the abdomen, tummy rising, tummy falling, tummy rising, tummy falling, as a point, because I was maybe having some difficulties identifying it at the tip of the nose. But then I decided, no, you're just breathing, just watch the breathing in its entirety. You don't need to find a place in your body to represent it, because that can of course always change depending on posture, whereas your entire breathing you can observe through in any of the postures of sitting, standing, walking, lying down, equally the same. You know you're breathing deep, you know you're breathing shallow, you know you're breathing long, you know you're breathing short, whether you're sitting, standing, walking or lying down. Always consistent. So I tend to use that. And when it's difficult to detect, notice the temperature of the breath is a useful way of identifying it. But where it goes deeper is that we then try to develop absorbed levels of samadhi, referred to as jhanas by many, and stages of jhana. And it is my understanding, and I could be very wrong, that in the Mahasi Sayadaw method they don't. They continue to observe just the rising and falling of the abdomen, and then in term of developing vipassana, or the quality of seeing clearly the arising of thoughts, feelings, and those passing away, by noting them in some way. So feeling agitated, saying agitated, agitated, or feeling hungry, 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 feeling I want to move, restless, restless, you know, this kind of noting procedure, which I don't practice. So I can't explain the actual differences. That's a very rough idea, because I've only practiced one way, properly, that is. So a very long background situation, but I've fortunately highlighted the question here. So I wonder how, if all of us are suffering delusion, how we can be responsible for it, especially when we are doing our best to become a fuller, rounded person. Does the baby create karma when it soils itself? So with the final point there, no, it's not creating bad, negative, it's neutral karma. It's not doing anything wrong. It's just doing, the body is just doing what comes naturally with respect of that. It may offend the person who's got to clear it up a bit, but that's not really what karma refers to. I'm falling to bits here. This is the karmic result, the vipaka of not putting your robe on properly. So I wonder how, if all of us are suffering delusion, how we can be responsible for it, especially as we are doing our best to become a fuller rounded person. By that I assume you mean practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, which is what we're doing. We will be developing, by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path of keeping sila, developing, or practicing meditation, developing wisdom. And it's the development of wisdom that is the way we erode delusion as one of the kilesas. The kilesas are greed, hatred, delusion. Lobha, dosa, moha. And that's the Pali words, lobha, dosa, moha, greed, hatred and delusion. Delusion is not so much avijja, ignorance, but confusion about what we know or think we know, misunderstanding it. Confusion is delusion. The 12 links of dependent origination are the map, the outline of cause and effect of all the causes of ignorance, avijja, in the first place, which leads to birth or rebirth, aging, sickness and death. So we're born out of ignorance. We are born because we didn't become enlightened and therefore free from suffering in a lifetime in order to cut all of the fetters and ties to rebirth. In fact, to describe it just simply, we are attached to sensual desire, we're attached to even hatred and anger. So we're attached to greed, we're attached to hatred because we are deluded. We cannot see clearly anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness and not self. So this causes our birth. We're born out of ignorance with this confusion, this delusion. Now, as we gradually erode greed, we gradually erode hatred, and we gradually will also develop more and more wisdom and gradually erode delusion. So ultimately, your question, I wonder how, if we're all suffering delusion, how we can be responsible for it, is now you're responsible for what you're doing in the present moment. You cannot change what you've done in the past. So if you don't believe in previous lives or even future lives, this life, still you cannot change what you've done up to now. You can apologize for things you've done wrong or take the benefit of things you've done well, the good things you've done, but you cannot change anything. You will be responsible for what you've done and suffer the consequences of the causes and conditions that you put in place, the results of karma, vipaka. These 12 links of dependent origination, broken into 12 steps, take us from ignorance to death. If we can free ourselves of desire within this lifetime, we will free ourselves from the attachment to life and therefore rebirth. Free ourselves to attain to nibbana and parinibbana, no more rebirth, as our teacher, the Buddha, did with his final enlightenment. So how can we be responsible? What you've done so far, how can we be responsible, is what you do now in the present moment. So if you keep sila, keep the precepts, you practice meditation, you will get rid of delusion, and you will not then be in the next life born with delusion. If you're free from delusion in this lifetime, you see everything clearly, then you are enlightened and therefore free from suffering. So I think that's what you mean by the question. I hope I've answered it sufficiently for you. So, those who restrain desire do so because theirs is weak enough to be restrained, and the restrainer or reason usurps its place and governs the unwilling, and being restrained, it by degrees becomes passive till it is only the shadow of desire. What would you answer to Mr. Blake's take on desire? So it's like William Blake, isn't it? I think. Well, it's not a question, than a statement. So what would I answer? I'm not sure. So we do not suppress desire. We restrain our contact with that fuels desire. So what I would answer to it is I would use different words. Our restraint has to be with our contact with that which fuels desire in order to reduce desire. So if we have the desire for food, naturally we're an eating kind of person, wants to eat. And we look at pictures of food, we smell smells of food, we listen to the sound of sizzling food, using our senses to experience food. We will want food, inevitably. We're fueling that desire that's inherently, naturally there. If we restrain by guarding our senses of seeing, by not looking at pictures of food or looking at food, not listening to it sizzling, not smelling the odours, walking away. If we restrain, guard those senses, then we will not be fueling that natural desire. So it will naturally subside of its own accord with some time. But this takes practice, and this is what the practice is. So I can't respond directly to Blake, or you, but say that we have in Buddhism this perspective on desire, that it is something that is natural and is there, and in fact keeps us alive by eating food and by procreating, if that's the right word, our species, and by also even the desire not to have. So aversion, fear, is for our own protection. It's what's kept this species alive and evolving over all of these years. So this is the human race based on desire. However, we can, with wisdom, see clearly what we need and what we want, because this has very much become, as life has become easier, as we've evolved, supposedly, we no longer eat just because otherwise we'd starve. Most people are eating because they enjoy eating and aren't necessarily ever or have ever been hungry. The natural desire is just coming from a place to keep us alive, and we reflect on this before we eat by our chant Patisankar Yoniso Pindapatam Patisewami each day, reminding ourselves that food is just the fuel to keep us alive for another 24 hours. It isn't for beautification, fattening, fun or taste, just fuel. Needs a bit of a degree of good taste, otherwise it's harder to digest. We don't get the necessary juices flowing if we don't have some nice aroma, nice smell. If we just ate plain, bland food, it would be difficult for our bodies to digest. They've evolved that way, through fueling this natural desire, of course. So we restrain, we guard our senses, thus removing the fuel from desire. So we can't say that, call it those that are restrained, as is referred to in this ditty, this poem, wherever excerpt it comes from, or refer to us as the restrainer, because that is not what we're trying to do. That is indicative of suppression, and that is again not at all what we're trying to do. Okay. I'll have to come back to that question because it's a bit long to put into a precise question. Dear Swamin Wahansa, is levitation possible? So I I don't discount that anything, whether or not anything is possible, or say anything is impossible. And certainly during deep states of absorption with your mind and your body, in a very relaxed state, so as you are unable to feel them, it can often feel as though you are lifting from the floor, especially if you're not supported by many pieces of furniture, as is often popular in meditation these days. I'm just sitting, this is just a thin piece of material, because we're supposed to sit on that to not get our robes dirty, but I'm sitting on flat concrete here, which you'd think would be uncomfortable, but it's not if you sit correctly. But after some time of meditation, I will feel no contact with the concrete. And you could say that you feel like you are levitating. So in that sense, it's not only possible, it's probable, the feel of levitation. But as for monks floating around in the sky on a cloud and past aeroplane windows, these are experiences you need to experience for yourself, see for yourself, as to know whether or not it is possible. You cannot prove it isn't. You can only witness it as something that is. And this is up to us if we can be bothered with that. But this is not what the Buddha taught. The Buddha taught us to become free from suffering in this lifetime, and whether levitation is possible or not is not a part of it. It isn't a part of enlightenment either. I have heard various male monastics refer to their situation as a career. Okay, so I didn't look up the word career in a dictionary, but career to me means, or would imply, to some extent, yes, a progression of development as opposed to just doing a job. But I would always associate with a pastime or activity that you are doing for some form of remuneration, reward, payment. Whether it says that in the dictionary or not, I don't know. But I would not say there is such a thing as a monk with a career. We would in fact renounce a career to become free from that and take a big demotion to become a trainee. And yes, one will go up the ladder, but only by the number of years you're in the robes. So it doesn't matter how good a monk you are, whatever your attainments are, the hierarchy is governed for very important reasons purely by and only by the number of vasas, that is the number of monsoon seasons, 3 months, that you've spent while still in the robes. So each and every end of the Vasa period is the monk's birthday. They have gained another Vasa. Now you could be aged 20, ordained, and by the time you're aged 30, you would have 10 Vasas. So you're an Ajahn in Thailand, a teacher, or you're a Mahatero in the Pali language, and therefore you're a senior monk, and you're aged 30. Or you could be aged 50 and have only been a monk for 3 Vasas, in which case you're a Navaka Bhikkhu, a trainee junior Bhikkhu. If that trainee Bhikkhu is, let's say he's enlightened, a Sotapanna, he's no further, he's technically advanced in his practice, but this is irrelevant in terms of that hierarchy is concerned. He's junior to the much younger, both in bodily age, and maybe a less experienced Bhikkhu who's perhaps never even some do things. They don't meditate, they do other things around the monastery. So the reason that's to be put in place like that is for fairness and structure and ease of understanding, and also the taking away of hierarchy. So although I'm calling it hierarchy, it's by its very nature not that. So I think career is an inappropriate word to use if you're a monk. You've ditched your career to renounce samsara. I can hear the broom coming along, sweeping. So I'll finish with this short question, because they sweep all around here in a minute. In fact, it's probably the last question anyway. What happens to karma after enlightenment? It is spent, just like that. Like a bank balance. Once the money's all gone, whether it's positive, you might have some money in the bank, a high, healthy balance. Once it's gone, it's gone. You might have a debt, a negative balance, but once it's paid off, it's gone. Karma's the same. When you become enlightened, this is the process of enlightenment. You have spent all karma and will attain to nibbana. That is enlightenment. It is spent. So on that note, I shall end it there. Thank you for your comments and questions. I hope there's something useful in there that you can use yourself or share with others. And thank you for watching. Until next time, in the meantime, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.